Welcome, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark, and I'm super excited to have on today a very influential person in the crypto space, Brock Pierce. Brock, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Now, you have been involved in crypto for a very long time and are an early adopter and an early investor in a lot of this. And before we kind of jump into what you're doing in Puerto Rico, because this is super interesting what's going on, I just want to get a quick hot take on the market from you because there's a lot of people out there, they're watching the price go down and they're thinking, oh my God, what's going on? So you've been around, you've seen this happen a few times. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so these are cycles that are, we're going to continue to see. This won't be the last time. And so the price is the primary barometer of sentiment. Sentiment and fundamentals at times are correlated, but often are not. And so the price is just kind of this emotional event where, FOMO kicks in, people run in, they're not making, call it logical or rational decisions. It becomes kind of irrational in its own way. And then the market eventually corrects. I really like these down markets. This is when I'm most excited. And this is when great things are built. What happens is as the market runs up, a lot of the wrong people come into the business. A lot of the intentions aren't there. Most people are just focused on money, 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 Lambos, Lambos, Lambos. And, it's a necessary purging. It's a necessary cleansing that occurs. And what's left after each one of these corrections and then resurgence is, through this period, only the true believers are left. And so it's also very difficult to build anything in those bull markets because everyone on your team is thinking about their own ICO and they're planning their thing, and you can't retain anyone for more than 90 days. So nothing ever gets built. It's in these moments where people hunker down, batten down the hatches, and they build. It's in the bear markets that great things get built. This is when, the good things happen. In those irrational moments, normally only bad things happen. So I know that's not what everybody wants to hear, but, if that doesn't resonate with you, you should probably ask yourself, what am I doing here?
That's a really good point, actually, Brock. And I think that a lot of people find themselves here without kind of getting what the tech does or why all of this is so important in the first place. And I try to talk about why it's so important a lot on my channel. And actually, that's why I really, really wanted to talk to you today, because you've been doing some awesome stuff down in Puerto Rico. And I wanted to kind of touch on a little bit of that. Now, Restart Week, that happened a few weeks ago now. Can you tell us kind of what that was and what the results of it were?
Yeah, so the first thing that we did when we came down here was try to attract, Puerto Rico's been suffering for what I describe as a brain drain. The people with the intellectual capital, the human capital, the financial capital, the spiritual capital, whatever it might be, the people with the means are the first to leave because they have the means to. And so about 500,000 people left the island as a result of Hurricane Maria. Now, call that the leaders. Now, the young students that are graduating from college, the number 15 engineering school in the U.S. is based here. NASA, Facebook, Google, Exxon, et cetera, have near full-time recruiters on campus because there are no jobs. It's one of the best places to recruit engineers from because there's very little opportunity on the island. And so if you want to do something interesting, if you want to take your skills or put your talents to work, you kind of have to leave. And so you don't only have the leaders leaving, but you have the future leaders leaving. This is a far more problematic thing than, the hurricane, which the island does and has mostly recovered from. A sustained brain drain long-term can lead to catastrophic events.
It's like an ongoing financial hurricane and, social
Yes,
hurricane.
that social hurricane is the larger of the issues. And so the idea is how do you resolve a brain drain? How do you combat a brain drain? The only way to do that is with a brain gain. You need to attract intellectual capital, human capital, financial capital, spiritual capital, people with superpowers and skills to build great things. You need the best and the brightest. And so the focus of that event is to attract, in the beginning, some of the most interesting people that can show up with skills that might be able to make a difference here. People that can, help create companies, angels that can show up and help fund young entrepreneurs with dreams, mentors that have been there and done that can lend the support of their experience to help young entrepreneurs be able to go and take on that big challenge. you know, venture capital or true financial capital to be able to then support the real capital requirements of building these things. And so the first event was in March of this year. We brought about 3,000 people down to the island. We sold out all the flights and all the airports in this city and the neighboring cities.
Wow.
The only time I'm aware of it that's happened since Hurricane Maria. And it was a blockchain, extravaganza, 3 major events, a major concert with like Wu-Tang and, Akon and Busta Rhymes, and
That's awesome.
30 or 40 small events, because Restart is decentralized. If you want to come down here and put an event together during Restart Week, please do. We're not here to organize the whole thing. We're here to help facilitate others that want to, throw various things and kind of consolidate that together. Think kind of like South by Southwest, except for, on a beautiful tropical Caribbean island.
Talking about blockchain.
Talking about blockchain. So that was really the focus of the first event. That was in the north. The second event was in the west, Restart West. The main university, the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, which has 13,500 students over there, great engineering, etc., was on really integrating with the school, integrating with the youth, throwing hackathons, and kind of checking out the west coast of the island, and then lots of conversation about community building, days of listening, integration more of the Puerto Rican community. And then the last event was Restart South. So we've been working our way around the island, which was in Ponce, which was really about, again, the first hackathon ever to occur in the second largest city. It felt like a Puerto Rican event more so than, call it newcomers or people that have been living on an island a while. The integration is starting to happen. A primary focus on things like agriculture. The island imports 89% of its food.
That's crazy.
They only have 2 weeks of food. If there was a natural disaster or an unnatural disaster that was substantial enough that it caused a disturbance in the supply chain, it would be catastrophic beyond words I would want to utter. 2 weeks of food. When food runs out, crazy things can happen with 3 million people.
It's a big island in the tropic or a tropical area. There's no reason they couldn't grow lots of food.
I spent a lot of time today talking about plantains. Plantains, if grown in abundance, are a food that you can live on solely for a very long time because it's got protein and a lot of things. So, how do you start to build up resilience? How do you build up what is decentralization? It's about having distributed nodes and not being relying entirely on centralized authorities. And I don't mean in a rebellious, revolutionary type of way. I mean in a resilient sort of way. We're trying to build resilient distributed systems, that can weather any storm.
And that's a really important point, because I think a lot of people don't realize how susceptible we are to the centralized services we have on offer. If there's a storm, well, you have to go down to your supermarket. That's a centralized service. When they're out of food, that's it. Or when your power goes out, that's all from a centralized server. When that goes out, that's it.
Yeah, and there's the power grid is extraordinarily centralized. Terrorists could attack a couple of points and knock out most of the power in the United States.
It's a wild thing.
And that's another crazy one. Imagine what the United States gets like, if it's without power for a long time, if it goes through what Puerto Rico did. I mean, these are why these systems are so important. It's not about challenging the incumbency. It's about building resilience into our infrastructure, because it may end up being imperative to our survival. And so the South was focused on agriculture, supply chains, shipping, energy, a lot of infrastructure focused. The next and the last event of the year, of the 12 months, is basically we did the north, the west, the south, the east, counterclockwise, turning back the dial. And, it's going to be focused on the beauty, because that's where the islands and the marinas and all the great diving and the bioluminescent bays, and there's multiple spots, but that beautiful aspect of the island, including the El Yunque rainforest. I mean, you have a magical rainforest here. This is like being in the Amazon, but with mountains and beaches, and it's an enchanting place. With a focus on that, as well as, some of the stuff that the government's hosting during that same week, which is on the Act 20 and 22 stuff, all the tax-related advantages that are here. Another thing that I've been talking about a lot lately, and more so as the weeks come, what are called qualified opportunity zones. in the United States, if you take your capital gains and you invest into a qualified opportunity zone, and that money is there for 10 years, you basically, don't pay taxes. Your basis get readjusted. It's not exactly that, but rather than break down the complexity of it, there's now an opportunity. An American that lives anywhere in the world can invest in areas where economic stimulus is needed, generally low-income areas of the U.S., Inglewood and Watson, L.A., Oakland and San Francisco, but all the cities basically have these areas where economic sort of stimulus is needed. And so the IRS and the U.S. government has passed the biggest tax reform in 30, 40 years, which is saying if you invest in areas where help is needed, you can invest directly and basically not pay taxes. Look me up if you want to learn more about that. This has kind of been my primary focus because 98% of the island of Puerto Rico is a qualified opportunity zone. It's the only qualified opportunity zone that is a luxury destination. And so, if you have any capital gains this year from Bitcoin or whatnot, prices are obviously down quite a bit. So a lot of those gains have been evaporated. But if you do, you should absolutely be understanding this as soon as possible. The government has created this program so that you don't have to pay tax. They've created this program so that there's an alternative, which is invest your money in places where help is needed.
That's amazing.
That's a much better deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's amazing.
Than writing the check. It's incredible. So there's going to be a lot of focus around some of those sort of things, and hopefully continue to drive home further the Puerto Rican angle. Hopefully there's an incorporation of the diaspora. A majority of the Puerto Ricans in the United States don't live in Puerto Rico. They're in New York, Chicago, Florida, et cetera. And, trying to get these messages across. And that will close out the year in terms of having done these sort of 4 activations. And I couldn't be happier with the progress. I mean, first time hackathons everywhere, engaging with, the community, having wonderful dialogues. It's been, and to get around and see the whole island, to understand the culture, connect with the people and the differences between the cities. And so it's been a fun ride. We're almost done with year 1, and then we're going to come back to the capital again. And probably sometime in May, these dates are not yet defined, but we're going to throw another very large event, which may attract thousands of people again. And so if you haven't made it to the major event earlier this year, or any of the small kind of events that we do around the island, and you feel like this message resonates with you in some way, and you feel called, please come on down and join us. And you don't need to come just during these events. The island's beautiful year round. You don't need to be down here just for events. There's probably about 1,500 of us that have moved down here, about 500 that are here now kind of permanently, another 1,000 or so that are in transition, some of which may change their mind. But, more people continuing to arrive. But the most important thing is show up with good intentions. Show up and understand that you need to get to know the local culture, get to connect with the community, know its history, and figure out how you can contribute. Figure out how you can improve things down here by bringing whatever gifts you have. Those are the types of people that we're looking for. This is not a gold rush. This is, an island that has been struggling for 500 years because of decisions that were not their own. Mm-hmm. Christopher Columbus set up shop here. All of Europe's influence on the Americas and all the indigenous people, it all began right here. This is ground zero.
And that's a lot of negative impact to have over the years. And obviously, what you guys are doing down there, it's excellent. I really love the whole idea, and it benefits everyone. This is the thing. As someone who comes down and can invest there,
win.
That's it. That's it. Everyone's winning.
Raise all ships.
That's exactly right. Now, I'm actually really interested. So you've been down there for a while. There's a lot of people down there. What kind of projects have actually been started? What's actually happening on the ground there?
So obviously one of my gifts, having, been a venture capitalist and an angel investor in startups and having founded tons of them, clearly one of the main areas of focus to me is in creating a startup culture, and we're supporting the startup culture down here. There haven't been any Puerto Rican startups that have raised money, like $1 million or more. There are no venture funds down here. The reason why, if you're an entrepreneur down here with a dream or a vision of the future, you have to move to San Francisco or New York for that, dream to be a reality, to even have a chance of it, right? And so that's something that we're able to change. You have call it an accelerator programs that have been launched down here. Wonderful people on the island. You got some co-working facilities, but you don't have angel investors. We've brought a lot of angels to the island now. We've brought a lot of mentors to the island, and we're setting up the first venture funds down here in the next. And so we've been doing the hackathons, starting to try and get that culture going. These things take a little while, but I would project in the next 6 months that you'll see three Puerto Rican startups that raise over $1 million each. That might not sound like much in the grand scheme of other markets, but all big things have small beginnings. That will feed a news cycle that, Puerto Ricans with dreams can actually start companies because the tools finally exist here for that to happen, which will allow the entrepreneurial dream to, hopefully flourish. It'll allow the impossible to become possible.
Well, and maybe some of that diaspora will look and see what's going on and go, wow, I've been here in San Francisco for 10 years working in tech, and I hate the city or whatever it might be. I want to go home. And now there's the opportunity to go home and actually do something.
Well, that's the key, because there's only going to be a handful of us, that ever come down here. Certainly not enough to make the type of difference that's needed. The success of Puerto Rico's future is largely going to rely and depend upon the diaspora. Mm-hmm. It's people choosing to come home to their roots. They left because of a lack of opportunity. We're just hoping to help spark, that chain of events to inspire people that opportunity does now exist here. You can build great things in Puerto Rico. You can come home if you feel called, and please do. The diaspora, will make or break this ultimately.
Now, the diaspora, obviously, they're really important in this situation here, but you do have more, non-Puerto Rican people coming in and wanting to be involved and wanting to help and wanting to, change their lifestyle, benefit from the tax status and all these different things. How can, a person do that? Just hop on a plane and come down? I mean, how easy it is actually for people to make that transition if they're living in, Pennsylvania or Washington or whatever, to come down to Puerto Rico and start a life there?
I mean, just as hard as moving to any other city. It requires, normally take a trip, come check it out, make sure you like it, make sure that it resonates with you, give some thought to what you might be able to do, spend some time, checking out the island, getting to know the people, learning a little bit about the culture, and see if you fall in love. And if you do, there's very good incentives to make the move. Mm-hmm. But yeah, normally it starts with showing up, checking it out, making sure that gut checking it feels right to you, and then ultimately making the move. And the move is a fair amount of work. It's not easy to move from city to city unless you're a digital nomad, which a lot of us are already. If you're a digital nomad, piece of cake. If you've got a house and a mortgage and a wife and kids or a husband, and then okay, obviously it gets a little more complicated, but it's all doable. I mean, remember, we are mobile. Mm-hmm. As much as you may have roots, you also have wings if you choose to use them.
That's right. And Puerto Rico is not the other end of the planet either. It's for a lot of people in the U.S., it's only a couple-hour flight from wherever you might be, and it's this Caribbean paradise island.
Yeah, if you're on the East Coast, this is very accessible. Direct flights up and down the coast.
That's it. No foreign visas needed. Right? It's a U.S. territory, so you just come on down.
Yeah, easy as that.
Makes a pretty big difference.
Especially if you're in Pennsylvania right now, the weather is very good. This is the right time of year to think about, taking that trip, call it reconnaissance, a little research and development. It's work.
It's a good excuse to get out of town. What do you do? I'm going to Puerto Rico for a work trip. That's really, really great. I think what you're doing in Puerto Rico is fantastic, and there's so much opportunity for blockchain to just go right across the board, right? And we're talking about everything from, land registry to aid distribution during disasters and stuff. But what gets me excited is, supply chain, getting those plantains put on, for blockchain supply shipping and, microgrid power transports and stuff like this. Like all of this is really big.
If you're working on any of this stuff, I mean, this is one of the best places to do it. You have a much more open-minded government than you do in most places. Wyoming obviously is leading in the U.S. as being they're leading the charge. I mean, Wyoming is definitely the most aggressive of all the states right now, trying to support all blockchain initiatives. Wyoming is definitely one of those other places, and I want to sing their praises because it's the most willing state government that we have in the U.S. right now. They are much more than Puerto Rico. They are doing everything in their power to get that sort of stuff happening there. So, if Wyoming calls to you, Wyoming is also a great place to go. But Puerto Rico has a lot of old and sort of broken infrastructure. There's a lot of work that needs to be done here. And I think there's tremendous opportunity to come down here. And, if you are trying to build microgrids, if you're trying to build smart grids, if you're trying to build peer-to-peer power systems that are resilient, it's clear because the hurricane knocked out the power where the challenges are. If you're focused on things like supply chains, obviously there's big ports here, shipping, lots of things go in and out, but obviously a ton of potential around agriculture. There's tremendous opportunity down here. Land registries, most people don't know this, but a lot of the land down here is not titled. It's a huge issue for the Puerto Rican government, a huge issue. Like FEMA is down here to help a bunch of people with their homes, get their homes fixed, etc. Big budgets for this, but a lot of people don't have a title, so FEMA's not allowed to help them. If someone can come down here and start to solve those problems so that the aid can end up in the hands of those that need it, this could make a big difference. It's a huge problem. If I was working on a land registry project and I already have my first deal, and I'm in rollout phase where I need to be head down, grindstone, I'd be down here trying to understand the problem and seeing if there's something you could do to fix it.
It's it's an incredible issue. I think for a lot of people, they couldn't comprehend, wait, I live in this house, but I can't prove that I own it to anyone. And that's, you can't get a loan, right, from the bank if you wanted to.
You can't even get the aid that's been allocated for you.
There you go. It's insane. People are trying to help you, but they have these systems that they have to go through because they're these old centralized systems where they have these boxes to check and they say, okay, well, where's your title for your property? Oh, I don't have one. Never did. My family's lived here for 400 years. Well, we can't help you then.
That's exactly the issue.
Crazy situation, without a doubt. I think it comes down to one of these things, be the change you want to see in the world. If this message is resonating with you, reach out, actually get out there and do something. Life has infinite opportunity, and you can really do anything you want to do. And if trying to help, a region develop like this is something you want to do, there are people. Brock and his team are down there, so they can help you, with that transition, and maybe check out a restart week or something like that. And you can actually get involved with that community and get moving forward a little bit. Now, Brock, I wanted to switch the conversation just a little bit before we run out of time here to EOS.
Yep.
Now, recently, the EOS Alliance has formed, and you're one of the board members of that, along with Galia Benartzi of Bancor and Akon. Akon, Brock, how did you guys get Akon on board? Why is this famous R&B singer on the EOS Alliance? And when I read this, I was like, what's going on? How is this possible?
Well, Akon's a friend of mine and has been for years. I brought Akon into crypto back in 2014. We were talking a bunch about this idea of doing Acoin and what could be done in Africa to help people. And we were both giving a talk at the Milken Global Conference. And I was obviously talking about crypto and things. And Akon was going to go on stage soon. I said, at the end of your talk, say Bitcoin Africa, it's going to change the world. He's like, Brock, I don't know enough to answer questions. I go, don't worry, everyone will assume you know what you're talking about. Just do it. And so he did, and then he became the first major celebrity that was publicly about, Bitcoin, and tons of articles were written back in 2014, and that was just me giving him a little nudge. But fast forward to today, he's actually, sincerely active in the space and trying to do big things. And so now that he's kind of really committed to trying to move this ball forward, specifically on the Africa front, we talked about his getting involved with, EOS and Alliance and, the projects that he wants to do going forward, and seemed like a good fit, because the idea was a composition of a board that is representative of the world. We're not a geographically focused organization. We're a philanthropic org that wants to be representative of a lot of the world. And, Akon is representative of, a lot of demographics. He's the most famous living figure in the world in Africa. He's the most known person in Africa, obviously resonates in the art and entertainment space. Mm-hmm. He's been known as to be, he managed Lady Gaga and discovered tons of major artists. He's known as a very astute businessman, does all sorts of stuff. Akon's, and a wonderful human being, trying to be the change. in the world. And so, I'm like, yeah, let's do this.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, when I first heard about Acon and Acoin, I started, wait, who is this guy? And started looking into it, and then I saw, well, wow, he's
Wakanda.
actually. I've seen what he's done, like with renewable energy in Africa, and it's like massive. It's absolutely massive. He is doing that. He is living that vision, and anyone can do it. It doesn't have to. You don't have to be a famous R&B singer to get out there and have an impact. But it's really awesome that Akon is doing this, because it is having an impact. When you have that larger audience, your impact can be larger. And so it's really cool to see him actually doing some of these projects, but also being involved on the EOS boards. So really cool stuff. Now,
You know,
in terms of
great.
the EOS Alliance itself, where do you see that moving as it kind of goes forward? What's kind of the intention of that? Is that kind of like trying to just spread the good word of EOS, basically?
Uh, it was born out of a void in the market. You obviously have Block One that created the EOS IO software, but they ran the token sale, and they are limited in some ways in terms of all the things that they can do. They can't do everything. Their hands are sometimes tied. You then have the block producers, who are all individual and biased and competing for elections or votes.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't speak with a single voice. And so if you're a member of the EOS community, where do you go to understand what's going on with referendums? How do you go engage in the dialogue of the things that are needed? So the EOS Alliance is a nonprofit that is focused on facilitating conversations between the various constituents in the ecosystem, so that meaningful, thoughtful conversation can be had that is representative of all the views, and to disclose that information to the EOS community in such a way that is hopefully as unbiased as it can possibly be, so that you can make informed decisions as a member of the community as to how you'd like to see the ecosystem evolve, you would like to vote. And so the idea is there has to be, and there can be many of these types of organizations, but someone that is trying to be a facilitator of conversation. It has no authority, no control. It's a facilitator of important conversations amongst the various constituents to distill down those messages so that we, the community, can hopefully learn and know what we need to know. And so working on things like the Constitution and going through the referendums
Mm-hmm.
and trying to figure out, how all of the ECAF and various things should work in terms of how dispute resolution. So if you're involved in the community and you care, try to get involved. We're a nonprofit, trying to just facilitate good conversation that can help the ecosystem develop in the best way possible.
Very, very cool. Brock,
And great people. I don't know if you've spent time with Thomas Cox and Ian Gregg or Gali. I mean, it's a wonderful, group of people, many of whom have been involved in the development of the EOS ecosystem for a long time, that have been community leaders or stewards, better said, for some time. And there are elections coming up. So it started with a 7-person founding board, but that entire board gets phased out over months 3, 6, 9, and 12. So it's a fully community elected board.
awesome.
We're just the startup team that gets it up and going, and then it's up to the community to decide what it becomes. Because most things have to start centralized. You have to have someone that starts it. You have to have someone that builds it. The problem is most people are, when they start something centralized, are unwilling to relinquish control and then allow it to evolve into that decentralized thing, because it's very, power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So the intention is you have to be able to pull together a team that are willing to do the heavy lifting to get the ball rolling, but then it's being handed over to the community, and it's a community owned and community led initiative.
Fantastic. It's so interesting to see the experimentation of these different blockchain projects with actually creating communities and governance and all these different things. Brock, I have one final question for you. Your wife, Crystal Rose, by the way, you guys have this blockchain, smart contract registered marriage. Is that correct?
Well, we've been married. We get married every year. Our marriages last a year and a day, and so we've had 3 of them. And so our relationship is ever evolving.
That's
The right
awesome.
way to think about it is, this is our attempt at kind of trying to upgrade marriage. A lot of marriages fail because of, call it, poor communication. And all the things that can come out of that. It's basically, it forces an annual review where, we both analyze the relationship, have to discuss what's working, what's not working, talk about how that relationship should be modified, how that agreement should be upgraded or not. If everything's perfect, we might just say renew as is. But it's a good forcing function. A lot of relationships fail because of poor communication. And when things start not working, then you are reluctant to address the issues, which allows it to atrophy. And then it only gets worse until eventually it turns into resentment, or, people feel and all the other things that can happen in relationships. And then eventually the relationship fails. And this has been our attempt at, playing with marriage and obviously trying to, incorporate blockchain or smart contracts, but it's really more of a methodology of how to look at a relationship and, how to play with it and potentially improve on it. They're experiments, and time will tell.
It's certainly an interesting thing. And she's a crypto entrepreneur of herself. I mean, I like what you guys are doing with the marriage thing. It's, that's definitely an institution that needs to be shaken up a little bit. But she's also, her own crypto entrepreneur, which I think is absolutely awesome. She has a decentralized messaging platform called Sense, which is very exciting too. No, I haven't had a chance to play with it yet.
Oh, so you can download it. You can pre-register in the Apple App Store right now with Sense, like Make Sense, SENSE. And if you email her, she can get you the test flight right now. I've been using it. It's phenomenal. It's text, voice, video chat on the EOS blockchain. It's as good as FaceTime. Plus, it's got a wallet. You can send tokens back and forth. And it's entirely on blockchain. Your identity is not known. Your phone number is not known. The only thing that's known is your EOS ID. And it works. And this has clearly historically been a killer app for the internet. Look at WhatsApp, look at Skype, look at Telegram. Messaging has the potential to be one of those mass adopted applications in 2019. Because right now, what the market really needs to recover is apps that get to 1 million users. Right now, it's a lot of theoretical, a lot of interesting ideas that kind of half work. The market's going to rebound when we start building real applications that scale and deliver on their promise. And I believe that we've hit this year our Netscape moment. Remember, the internet had been around the 70s, 80s, mid 90s. It wasn't until 1995 when Netscape was created that we had that moment where consumers were able to use a blockchain. I'm chain agnostic, so I'm not an only EOS person. I support all the chains. I don't believe that my chain or that chain is better than your chain. I believe that's the equivalent of religious fundamentalism, and we've learned over thousands of years that doesn't work. If anyone makes the world a better place, we all win. If people are doing things with good intentions and doing their best, we should be supporting each other. We're a small industry, and we should be working and collaborating more than we often do. Often because people have a lot of tokens in one project, they become very biased out of their self-interest, and they tend to hate on others, and they don't even realize it's because of their selfish interests. We are, hopefully here to make the world a better place. And so it's important to remember, just because it's not your project or it's not the thing that you follow the most closely, to try and operate with open minds, because we build open source systems with open hearts. And so, but EOS is, this year, there will be other third generation blockchains that can do three things. It's the first blockchain that's live, that's highly scalable, that has no friction, meaning you don't need tokens to access it as a first-time consumer. It has to be frictionless, and it's low latency, high speed. You need those things for consumer applications to take off if they're not financial in nature, right? For payment stuff and, financial transactions, moving tokens for value, little different. But if you want to build real consumer dApps, you need those things. And there will be other blockchains coming soon. But I believe we've had our Netscape moment. I believe this is the equivalent of when the iPhone came out and the App Store was launched. And Sense could be one of those first massive apps. And remember, Netscape wasn't the winner in the end. So just because EOS is first doesn't mean they will be last. It's Chrome and Safari and Firefox, and we've got Brave now. But these are the right analogies to think about it. We've had our Netscape moment. Now, the internet didn't take off massively in 1995 when it came out. It took a few years. But I believe we've crossed that most important threshold. and yeah, I'd shoot Crystal an email, get access to the beta, shoot me a message, or definitely go into the iPhone store and download it. It's there's not many projects that I've seen that have the potential to be that 1 million person plus application in the next 3 to 6 months. This one
messaging is huge.
Could be one of them.
I'm gonna have to check it out. Wait, is it on Android yet?
This is the soft launch, as I understand it. The main launch, I think, is in February. You should have Crystal on, and she can tell you more.
I will.
And that's when Android and I think desktop go live. I hope I was allowed to say that. The MDA, marriage non-disclosure, friend DA. I don't know. Hopefully, my wife doesn't call me yelling at me for disclosing things that are not supposed to be known yet.
You're all good.
But you can look it up in the App Store. I mean, I think it's scheduled to launch like December 21st for iPhone, and she can probably get you an Android beta sooner.
Great.
But that's
great.
the soft launches later this month.
Very cool. We're looking forward to it. It's certainly very interesting. Brock, this has been a super interesting chat. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down and tell everyone about what's going on in Puerto Rico and a little bit about EOS as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Hope to do it again.